Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to turn this chaotic room into a blissful Zen resting place. I'm going to do it in 72 hours and for under €100. This is DIY design. So let's start by taking a look at the room. It's a nice, big and bright room, but from my perspective it looks mental. The purple and the wallpaper could work, but it's a little stressful. My plan is to make this room somewhere where you can just chill out, but I've only got 3 days to do it. It's also not my room, so any money I spend won't be returned. So I'm going to do it on the tightest budget possible. We'll start by clearing out the room. Just get everything out of the room and assess the workload. It really is just cosmetic in here, paint and wallpaper. There is one structural issue which I have to fix, which is this hole in the wardrobe. The first thing I'm gonna get at is fixing this wardrobe. So you have this little hole here. Yeah, I know, it's such a mess. It's not even square. I mean, look at this. You've got like, someone obviously got like a circular saw and like cutting it in, but the saw was cutting at an angle like that. It might have been a jigsaw. So after ripping a bit of this and a bit of this, and yeah, so they've got this hole to fill. That's what was on the other side. This is definitely pre-manufactured with the wardrobe. But what this wardrobe has got a few details which I personally can't deal with. Like, so if you look up here, you'll see this here. That's fine, but it's because there's no bottom board here. The bottom board is back in here. So this is a small cabinet. There's only a little bit of room at the back. So obviously this was put in to cover a gap here. However, I mean, get yourself one that is going to go from here to here, or else cover the back and do something at the back. I have an idea what I might do, but by bringing this forward, it's going to cover this unsightly part and this. So bring that forward and it'll take the eye away from them. I'll fill in this hole. And then I'll just get some wood filler and start filling all of this and get it ready for painting. Now the room is clear, let's take a look around and identify some jobs. One thing that I noticed straight away is this curtain rail. It's this cheap plastic curtain rail. It never holds up. It's always falling down everywhere I see them. So we'll get rid of that and we'll just put a roller blind in there. This wallpaper is well past its sell-by date, or its fashionable date, so we're going to get rid of that. I'll start by building a box to fill the hole in the wardrobe. I'll replace the chipboard shelf with some pine window board and tidy up the top of the wardrobe with some thin plywood. I can then fill the joints, sand the joints, and it's ready for paint. The purple walls and ceiling will get a coat of white paint. I'll change the wallpaper for something more contemporary and create a stone or tile feature behind the bed to bring some texture to the room. All that's left is to match the trim to the wardrobe and paint the floor brown. So I'm going to start by fixing this little monstrosity here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build a box this size, basically a little box. I have found this material down below, so based on the material I have, this is going to be the thickness of my box. Unfortunately, the width of this is actually the same width there once I edge it with this, so that will tell me how I'm going to build my box, the size of it, and then hopefully I should just slot the box in. Unfortunately, this is actually really shiny stuff, so I'm gonna have to give this a good sand down to get it closer to the matte effect on this, which will hopefully take the paint. Using this scrap chipboard, I'm going to fill this hole in the wardrobe. Now the hole is 472 millimeters wide. The chipboard that I have is 450 millimeters wide, but it's also 12 millimeters thick. So using 450 and 212s will come to 474.
Now the hole itself is of course 472, so I'll have to squeeze it tight into the hole or clean off some of the edges. Now creating a box like this is actually really easy. I'll take my material, which is 450, and then I'll make a cut of height minus 2 times the thickness of the chipboard. Using the same measurement, we can then cut the 2 side pieces. Top and bottom of the box are the width of the opening, but for me it's going to be 474, so I can keep the box square. The construction of the box is also straightforward, and this is why I like having a solid back or bottom to a box. Lay the back of the box on the floor or a hard surface. We can then line up the 2 side pieces, keeping them flush with the outer edges as the width is the same. We definitely want to drill pilot holes as we're using chipboard. We can then attach the sides using screws. The top and bottom should hopefully line up perfectly with the width of the box. We drill a pilot hole in each corner and attach the top and bottom to the sides with screws. This would probably be strong enough, but for the sake of it, I'm going to attach the top and bottom to the back of the box with a screw in the middle. I'm actually using an electric cleaner here to clear off this opening. You could also just use a sander or a felt knife or a rasp just to open the hole a bit. Now there was a switch on the outside of this wardrobe, but I needed to take it away to clean up the line of the wardrobe. I find that something even as small as a switch can really affect my eye's desire for smooth clean lines. So I drilled a hole in the top of the box, and then I just fished the cable from the outside of the wardrobe through the top of the box and reattached the switch. I was also fortunate enough to find this length of 6-inch window board, which I'm going to use to replace the top shelf at the back of the wardrobe. Now, I know you're probably thinking, oh, no wonder this costs less than €100 if everything is free and you're not actually paying for anything. But the truth of the matter is you can get this stuff for free because people are giving this stuff away all the time on local ads. Now that's not where I got it. My old man hoards this stuff, so for me there tends to always be something on hand which is close to doing the job, and that's the point. You just gotta work with what you got nearby or free. It requires some thinking though. The back of the window board had a 2-inch strip which I took off the screws out of it, and it left a nice little 2-inch line that I could just cut 2 inches off it because I needed to take it down to 4 inches because 6 inches just would have protruded too much past the chipboard. I cut this tight and it's fitting in nicely, and it pretty much holds up its own weight, but for the sake of it I'm going to attach some angle brackets to this 2x1 under it and up into it from underneath. Now for some more free stuff. So I had these 150-year-old slates. They're beautiful, still in great condition. They're very thick slate, and they came off a house in Youghal, which is over 150 years old, so they have weathering at the top, but you can see actually the majority of the slate was actually underneath the layer above it. Now I was going to use these slates to tile the back of the wardrobe, however I decided against it as they would have required a lot of finishing. I did however use them in a kitchen of another project which I will be uploading soon. But for this project I happened to happen upon these concrete tiles that my old man had, and there was exactly the right amount, and also because they were 150mm, 6 inches wide, it was exactly the right width. I would have no cutting, so it was a no-brainer. They weren't however without their issues, and firstly the pattern. I searched all over Google to see if I could find this tile, but I couldn't find this tile anywhere, so I had to kind of wing the pattern. I'm very happy with the pattern I went with in the end, but it was just trial and error. These tiles, they have a high edge and a low edge, and they have 2, I would say, equal edges. They're broken up into 2 triangles, so what I did was this kind of, if you look at the middle row, sort of what looks like a convex square, and then it's a concave square, convex square, and a concave square. So that's the pattern I went with, and I'm actually delighted with the pattern, to be honest with you. Now, attaching them, I had just about enough tile adhesive, so a thin layer on the back of the wall and on the back of the tile. As I was putting in the last few tiles on the top layer, I was squeezing in the last one, and you can see the middle tile popped out. So I tried to squeeze that one in and 2 more popped out, and I realized I was going to have to cut something. I tried cutting this concrete, but it was really tough. So what I ended up doing was actually getting a chisel and just chiseling out the side of the chipboard. The last tile just popped in then. Hopefully they'll stay there. I wouldn't want one of these hitting me in the head in the middle of the night. Next I got started on the white paint, and I started by painting the damp spot on the ceiling because that's going to need a lot of coats and thick. Generally when I'm painting, I like to do the edges first and behind the radiator before doing the roller work. I think it gives a cleaner finish. But here I realized that I should have filled the holes first and used the caulking. So I filled the holes and used the caulking, and then I got back to using my brush to paint around the edges. Now I am very impatient when it comes to wall filler or caulking drying, so to stop myself from painting on soft filler, I decided to change tact and do this top of the wardrobe filler piece. I found this 3mm plywood, but I didn't have a long enough length of it, so I ended up having to cut it out in 2 sections. So there will be a joint in the middle which I will have to fill, but it will still be better. My ultimate aim, if I do a smooth enough putty and sanding job, would be that the joints would be seamless anyway. Now I know that's not going to happen because I don't have the time or the impetus, to be honest, but I will do a nice job. I had to cut 2 holes in the plywood to accommodate these recessed lights. Now ideally I would have liked to have used a jigsaw or a drill bit of the right size, but I didn't have that, so I ended up using a Stanley knife. Now it did the job, but it can be dangerous, so I would definitely advise wearing gloves if you're going to do it this way. Once I've attached the 2 pieces of thin ply up into the wardrobe just using some small screws, I can get some putty, fill the joint and also the leading edge as it hits the chipboard. Now you want this to be as thin a layer as possible to reduce the amount of sanding later. Now that the putty has dried to just under the required time, it's time to paint the rest of this room. I'm giving this a coat of white paint, and I must say it is nice to see the purple go. Personally, when I'm designing a room, I try to keep the colours as neutral as possible, and any colour that I do bring into it tends to be sort of an accent. I find it's easier to match that way, be that furniture, be that wood, whatever it is. I also got this roller handle for the ceiling, but it is awesome on the wall, and I'll be using that now instead because it just takes all the work out of it. This was actually some cheap B&Q white paint, and it covered up the purple really well. I'm going to come back and touch it up later, but I'm going to leave it dry for now and start prepping this wardrobe for paint. I decided to putty inside the gaps here. The less amount of lines or gaps that we see, the better, especially when they're crooked gaps. Because I'm going to be painting this wardrobe, I decided it was a good time to clean up the area a little bit, and the final bit of prep then is just to make sure I don't get any paint on this concrete because it's kind of an unfinished surface and I just don't want any staining on it. Now this is the part I was excited for. This wallpaper, I got this at a decent price. It was €24 a roll, so €48 for the 2. Not too bad, but also quite a big proportion of the budget, but it is really nice wallpaper. I did, however, run into a problem, and the problem was that I had 9-foot high ceilings. So the rolls are designed for 8-foot ceilings, which would have meant that if I wanted to do the whole wall without having a joint down the middle of 2 of the strips, then I would have had to buy another roll, and that wasn't an option. So I decided in the moment that I was going to paint the outsides white, just have the center instead of doing the whole wall, just do it the center out, 5 strips of wallpaper. Attaching the wallpaper was actually really straightforward. I just left 2 inches top and bottom of leeway on the paper, pasted it on the floor, and then stuck it up and then trimmed the top and bottom together. You can see I'm like getting the edges, putting a bit more paste in and just getting it nice and tight. At this point the walls were dry, so I'm giving it a final touch up of white paint. So the usual trick again is just go around the edges first with the smaller roller just to get the edges nice and clean, and then bring the bigger roller to finish off the job. I did a bit more sanding and cleaning of this putty in the wardrobe. I honestly did not sand it down as much as I would have liked to, but it was enough because I really hate sanding, especially sanding by hand. After a good clean, I started painting these wardrobes with the chalk paint. Same basic premise as the walls. Start by painting in the crevices and the grooves, and then paint the whole thing with a roller. Now this went on lovely and quick, and voila, you're looking at the result of one coat of chalk paint. Now this is the first time I'd ever used it, and I couldn't recommend it any higher really, because it takes to all different surfaces and it just goes on so easy. And I personally like a matte finish. I had planned on actually painting all the doors of the wardrobe as well with the chalk paint, but this is where the chalk paint falls down, is the finish on the doors is way more stain resistant and the chalk paint just isn't stain resistant. So it was better to have the doors in their original colour, and because I'm painting the other wood in the room brown, I'm not worried about a mismatch of wood surfaces. As you can see here, I'm using a little trick. Instead of masking, I like to stick paper into the crevices and then just paint the edges. That was the mirror. I decided to paint the mirror with the chalk paint as a way to sort of tie the doors back into the wardrobe. Because the truth of the matter is I did not have enough paint to paint those doors, so they weren't getting painted anyway. But I am happy with my decision because I do think they look better with the wood rather than the chalk paint, and I do think they will be more stain resistant. Attaching the doors was also very straightforward. You just clip them back into their hinges. The key, however, is to get them aligned right, and each hinge has a Phillips screw, and it sort of like pulls the hinge out and in, and it allows you to straighten up the door. So I took my time making sure that the gaps were all even. I reattached the mirror and the handles, touched up a little bit, and I really like how this wardrobe turned out. The final job in this room is to finish this floor, so I'm giving it a quick sweep, a clean up and a hoover, and I'm really just going over, taking out any sort of obvious knocks and bumps and giving it a very light sand. And the reason I'm not putting too much into it is because I'm going to go over this with some dark brown satin wood. Now I know that's not the right paint for the floor and it'll most likely wear, but I'm almost kind of building that into the equation. Now I could spend an absolute fortune on this floor, and I could spend an unbelievable amount of time on this floor if I wanted to bring up the natural wood, but it's honestly not worth it because it's only pine anyway. But what I'm going for with this design is the sort of a weathered look, so I'm liking the fact that the satin wood will have a matte or a satiny kind of finish, and then hopefully over time the more worn areas will create a sort of a worn floor, sort of old feel to it. I'll probably never know how it eventually comes out, but it looks good right now in the moment when I'm using it, and the satin wood costs €12. This is another one coat wonder, and with a super quick drying time, I was able to get straight back into the room and show you guys the progress. I still have to put a blind up. I actually managed to get this mustard blind from Argos reduced, again €12, so I have to attach the blind and dress the room. But you get a look at the texture of the concrete and even the finish on the chalk paint. You can see it there, and you can also get a kind of an idea what this wallpaper is like. Overall, I think the room looks good, and I think it looks far more expensive than €100. So without further ado or special effects, let's have a look at the final product. If you like this video, please show me by leaving a like and subscribe for more content. I have a full apartment renovation coming soon. Take it easy.